This $3,000 ring is cheap trash. I deserve better than this broke-ass proposal. You think you can buy me with this cheap ring? I never want to see you again.
Your loss.
You arrogant bastard! A man with your money should be ashamed of himself!
What Keisha didn't know was that the ring was never the test. I was.
If this story already hits you in the heart, please subscribe, turn on the bell, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from.
My name is Joe Cameron. I'm 42 years old, and if you ask people in Chicago who I am, they'll probably tell you that I'm the founder and CEO of Cameron Logistics and Infrastructure Group, a company specializing in freight transportation, warehouse management, and commercial real estate development across the United States. Every day, thousands of products travel through facilities managed by my company. Our trucks cross state lines before sunrise. Our warehouses operate day and night. Construction teams oversee industrial projects worth millions of dollars. For most people, my life looks successful. What they don't see are the sleepless nights, the endless meetings, the delayed shipments, the negotiations that stretch until midnight, and the pressure that comes with knowing that thousands of employees depend on the decisions I make every day. Building a company wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast. For nearly 20 years, work consumed almost every hour of my life. But despite everything I had achieved professionally, the thing I valued most wasn't my business. It was my marriage. Or at least, it used to be. 6 years earlier, I met Tasha Cameron at a charity event in downtown Chicago. Back then, she was nothing like the woman standing in front of me tonight. She wasn't talking about designer brands. She wasn't comparing herself to wealthy influencers on social media. She wasn't obsessed with luxury vacations or expensive jewelry. She was funny, simple, spontaneous. I still remember the first real conversation we had. The event itself was unbearably boring, and we both escaped to the dessert table at the same time. She laughed when I accidentally dropped my fork on the floor. That laugh stayed in my head for weeks. 3 months later, we were inseparable. 1 year later, I proposed. And 6 years after that, we found ourselves sitting in one of Chicago's most luxurious restaurants, celebrating an anniversary that suddenly felt meaningless. At least, meaningless to her. Over the years, I had watched something inside Tasha slowly change. At first, the changes were almost invisible. She started following fashion influencers. Then came the luxury handbags. Then the designer shoes. Then the obsession with jewelry. Soon, almost every conversation somehow turned into a discussion about money. Did you see Ashley's new bracelet? Michelle's husband bought her a Porsche. Vanessa just spent 2 weeks in Italy. Look at the ring Jessica got for her anniversary. At first, I didn't think much about it. People compare themselves to others all the time. But eventually, those comments became daily conversations. Then they became expectations. And finally, they became disappointments. Every dinner ended with comparisons. Every vacation ended with complaints. Every gift somehow failed to meet the standard set by someone else's husband. 3 months earlier, Tasha had spent nearly an hour showing me engagement rings on her phone. Not because she wanted a new proposal. Because she wanted everyone around her to envy what she wore. This one costs $80,000, she had said, pointing at a massive diamond. Can you imagine wearing something like that? I had smiled and shrugged. It's beautiful. She looked at me with disappointment. Beautiful isn't enough, Joe. At the time, I didn't respond. The truth was that I didn't know how to respond anymore. Tonight was supposed to be different. I had reserved the private section of the restaurant weeks in advance. The place overlooked the Chicago skyline. Crystal chandeliers reflected against enormous windows. Soft jazz floated through the room. White roses decorated every table. Friends and family members surrounded us, expecting to witness a romantic celebration of 6 years of marriage. Instead, they were witnessing a public humiliation. Tasha grabbed the ring box from my hand and opened it once more. The diamond sparkled under the restaurant lights. For a brief moment, I thought she might calm down. I was wrong. $3,000, she repeated, shaking her head. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this looks? Several guests lowered their eyes, pretending not to listen. Others openly stared. One woman near the bar whispered something to her husband. The pianist quietly stood up and walked away from the piano. I could feel my face growing warm. Not because I was angry, because I was embarrassed. Because the woman standing in front of me was the same woman who once ate burgers with me in my car after midnight and swore that she didn't care about money. Sometimes people don't change overnight. Sometimes they change so slowly that you don't realize what's happening until one day you wake up and the person you loved has become a stranger. Tasha placed the ring box back onto the table as if it disgusted her. I can't believe you thought this was acceptable. Tasha. No, Joe. Look around you. She pointed toward the other guests. Every woman in this room has something better than this. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because of the ring, because, for the first time, I realized that she wasn't comparing our marriage to those around us. She was competing with them. And somewhere along the way, our relationship had become part of that competition. She picked up her purse from the chair beside her. I'm leaving. A few people tried to stop her. Tasha, wait. Calm down. But she ignored everyone. She adjusted her dress, turned toward the exit, and walked across the restaurant floor in complete silence. The sound of her heels echoed against the marble tiles. Every eye followed her. Just before reaching the doors, she stopped and looked back at me. You should have known I'd never wear something like that. Then she pushed open the glass doors and disappeared into the cold Chicago night. And for the first time in 6 years of marriage, I found myself sitting completely alone at our anniversary table, surrounded by shocked faces, wondering when love had stopped being enough. I stayed in that restaurant for nearly 20 minutes after Tasha walked out. Not because I thought she would come back, not because I still expected an apology, but because I couldn't bring myself to stand up and face the dozens of people who had just witnessed my wife call my anniversary gift cheap trash. The silence around me was unbearable. A waiter finally approached our table. Sir, should I bring dessert? I looked at the untouched glasses of champagne, the roses, the candles that had slowly burned down throughout the evening, and forced a smile. No, thank you. He nodded awkwardly and walked away. Across the room, some guests pretended not to look at me, while others weren't even trying to hide their curiosity. I couldn't blame them. 30 minutes earlier, everyone had expected a romantic anniversary celebration. Instead, they had watched my marriage crack in front of their eyes. I loosened my tie and stared through the giant windows overlooking downtown Chicago. The city lights reflected against the glass, but all I could think about was a completely different night 6 years earlier. Back when none of this existed. Back when Tasha and I were just two people trying to build a future together. When we first met, she didn't care about expensive restaurants. Our first date had been in a small burger place on the north side of the city. Nothing fancy. Plastic chairs, paper menus, cheap music playing through old speakers. I remember apologizing for not choosing something more elegant. She laughed and grabbed one of my fries. Joe, I don't care where we eat. Back then, I believed her. And for a long time, I had no reason not to. During our first years together, life was simple. I spent most of my days buried in work, trying to expand Cameron Logistics and Infrastructure Group. My company wasn't nearly as large as it is today. We only had 2 warehouses and a handful of trucks. Most nights, I came home exhausted. Tasha would be waiting for me on the couch, complaining that I worked too much. She used to joke that she was competing with my business for my attention. At the time, it sounded cute. Now, looking back, I wonder if the competition had simply changed. Because somewhere along the road, my business stopped being the thing she competed against. Money became the competition. It started innocently enough. One of her college friends married a real estate developer, and suddenly social media became flooded with photos of private beaches, luxury cars, and diamond bracelets. Then another friend got engaged. The ring was enormous. For weeks, Tasha couldn't stop talking about it. Can you imagine wearing something like that? At first, I laughed. Honestly, it looks heavy. She didn't laugh back. Little by little, our conversations changed. What used to be discussions about family, dreams, and future plans slowly turned into discussions about brands, prices, and appearances. At dinner, she showed me handbags that cost more than some people's annual salaries. On vacation, she compared our hotels to those chosen by her friends. At parties, she carefully analyzed everyone's clothes, watches, and jewelry. And if someone arrived in a luxury car, she somehow found a way to mention it before the night was over. I kept telling myself that it was just a phase, that everyone goes through moments like that. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. About 8 months before our anniversary dinner, we attended a birthday party organized by one of Tasha's closest friends. The entire evening felt more like a competition than a celebration. Women compared rings, men compared cars. People casually mentioned investment properties and luxury vacations, as if they were discussing the weather. I still remember Tasha squeezing my arm when another couple walked into the room. The woman immediately showed everyone her new diamond necklace. Her husband spent almost $70,000 on that, Tasha whispered. I shrugged. Good for them. She looked annoyed. That's all you have to say? What else am I supposed to say? She crossed her arms. Nothing. But I could see the disappointment in her eyes. The drive home that night was silent. Then, halfway back, she suddenly spoke. Do you ever feel like we're falling behind? I almost laughed. Behind who? Everyone. I looked at her, genuinely confused. We have a beautiful home. We're healthy. We travel whenever we want. What exactly are we behind on? She stared out the window. You wouldn't understand. At the time, I thought she was simply frustrated. Now, sitting alone in that restaurant, her words echoed differently in my head. Maybe she had been telling me exactly who she was becoming. Maybe I just didn't want to hear it. My phone buzzed on the table. For a second, I thought it was Tasha calling to apologize. It wasn't. It was a message from my younger sister, Melissa. Are you okay? Everyone's talking about what happened. I stared at the screen for several seconds before typing back. I'm fine. It was a lie. I wasn't fine. Not even close. Because humiliation wasn't the worst part of what had happened tonight. The worst part was realizing that, while I had spent 6 years believing that love was the foundation of our marriage, Tasha seemed to believe that status was. And those two things are very different. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and placed the ring box in my pocket. The restaurant manager stopped me near the entrance. Mr. Cameron, I'm very sorry about tonight. I forced another smile. Thank you. Outside, the cold Chicago wind hit my face immediately. Cars passed by. People laughed somewhere down the street. The city continued to move as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my entire evening had collapsed in less than 5 minutes. I took out my phone and opened my messages. There were already dozens of notifications from friends and family asking questions. But one notification caught my attention. It was a message from Tasha. Only 6 words. I'm staying with my friends tonight. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I put the phone back into my pocket, got into my car, and drove home alone, wondering whether the woman waiting for me 6 years ago had disappeared forever. I barely slept that night. Not because Tasha wasn't home, not because of the humiliation at the restaurant, but because, for the first time in 6 years of marriage, I couldn't stop asking myself a question that terrified me. Had my wife fallen out of love with me, or had she simply fallen in love with the lifestyle she thought she deserved? At 6:30 the next morning, I woke up alone in our bedroom. The left side of the bed was untouched. Her phone charger was gone. The closet door was open, and several of her favorite dresses had disappeared. For a few seconds, I simply stood there, staring at the empty space where her clothes had been. The house felt strangely quiet. Usually, Saturday mornings belonged to Tasha. Music playing downstairs, coffee brewing in the kitchen, her voice echoing through the hallway as she planned brunch with her friends. But that morning, there was nothing. Only silence. I put on a grey sweatshirt and walked downstairs. The dining table was exactly as we had left it the previous evening. 2 wine glasses, an anniversary card I had bought 3 days earlier, and the small velvet ring box that Tasha had thrown back onto the table before storming out of the restaurant. I picked it up and opened it again. The diamond sparkled under the morning sunlight coming through the windows. $3,000. A ring that represented 6 years of memories. A ring that, in less than 5 minutes, had become the symbol of everything that was wrong with our marriage. My phone buzzed. It was Melissa. "Please tell me you didn't spend the whole night blaming yourself." I sighed. "I honestly don't know what to think anymore. Joe, she humiliated you in front of an entire restaurant." "I know." There was a short silence. Then my sister asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you think she married you for the wrong reasons?" I walked toward the kitchen window. Chicago was slowly waking up outside. Cars filled the streets. People jogged through the neighborhood. Life continued as usual. "I don't know," I finally answered. "But I'm starting to wonder." After hanging up, I sat alone for nearly an hour. My thoughts drifted back to the countless arguments Tasha and I had had over the past year. The designer handbags, the luxury vacations, the constant comparisons, the endless complaints that someone else's husband always seemed to be doing more. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was Tasha. "Tasha, I'm at the Peninsula Hotel with Ashley and Michelle." 30 seconds later, another message appeared. "Tasha, I need some space." Space. After humiliating me in front of dozens of people, she needed space. I stared at the message but didn't reply. Instead, I opened social media, and that's when I saw it. Ashley had already posted pictures from the hotel's rooftop restaurant. Champagne bottles, luxury handbags, designer sunglasses. And there, sitting in the middle of the group, laughing as if nothing had happened, was my wife. The caption read, "Never settle for less than you deserve." I felt something inside me break. Not anger, not sadness. Something colder. Disappointment. Because while I had spent the entire night wondering how to save my marriage, Tasha was celebrating its collapse with her friends. I threw my phone onto the couch and buried my face in my hands. And that's when memories I had spent years trying to forget suddenly came back. My father. I was 13 years old when he lost almost everything. For years, he had built a successful business, believing that money and love could coexist peacefully. He was wrong. After his divorce, I watched him sit alone in our tiny apartment, repeating the same sentence over and over again. The easiest thing to find is someone who loves your money. The hardest thing to find is someone who loves you when the money disappears. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Now, sitting in my empty kitchen, I understood perfectly. The truth is that there was something Tasha never knew about me. Something almost nobody knew. To the outside world, I was simply the owner of a successful logistics company, a hard-working entrepreneur who lived comfortably. But reality was far more complicated. 10 years earlier, Cameron Logistics and Infrastructure Group had expanded far beyond freight transportation. We had invested in commercial real estate, distribution networks, software systems, and international shipping. Quietly, year after year, my investments multiplied. I bought industrial parks, warehouses, office buildings, technology companies. I became a silent partner in projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Today, my net worth wasn't measured in millions. It was measured in billions. But I had spent years hiding that reality. I drove normal cars. I avoided extravagant displays of wealth. I wore simple clothes. Not because I was ashamed of my success, because I had spent my entire life terrified of becoming nothing more than a bank account in someone else's eyes. Even our house told only half the story. Yes, it was beautiful. Yes, it was expensive. But compared to what I could actually afford, it was modest. Tasha had no idea. She thought I was wealthy. She had no idea just how wealthy. And, for years, I convinced myself that keeping that secret protected our marriage. Now, for the first time, I wondered if all it had done was delay the inevitable. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time, it was my lawyer, David. "Happy anniversary weekend," he joked awkwardly. I laughed bitterly. "Worst timing ever. I saw some photos online." "Of course you did." There was a brief silence before he changed his tone. "Joe, are you okay?" I looked around the empty kitchen. "No." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he asked quietly, "Do you think this marriage can survive?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to defend Tasha. I wanted to believe that the woman I married was still somewhere beneath the obsession with money and status. But after everything that had happened, I couldn't. I honestly don't know anymore. We talked for another 20 minutes before hanging up. The rest of the afternoon passed in complete silence. Around 6 o'clock, I opened Instagram again. Another post. Another photo from the hotel. Tasha and her friends were standing beside the rooftop pool, holding champagne glasses. The caption this time was even worse. A real woman knows her worth. Thousands of people would probably look at that picture and think she was talking about self-respect. But I knew the truth. She was talking about money, about jewelry, about luxury, about appearances, about a price tag. And for the first time in 6 years, I started asking myself whether my wife had ever truly loved me, or whether she had simply loved the version of me that she thought could finance the life she wanted. That night, as darkness swallowed the city outside my window, my phone lit up one last time. It was Tasha. Only 3 words. We need to talk. And deep down, I already knew that the conversation waiting for us would change everything forever. The message sat on my screen for nearly 5 minutes. We need to talk. 3 simple words. 6 years earlier, those words would have made my heart race with excitement. Back then, we need to talk usually meant planning a vacation, choosing furniture for our house, or discussing our future children. Tonight, those same words felt like the final chapter of a story that neither of us knew how to save. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stood in front of the living room window, staring at the Chicago skyline glowing in the darkness. Thousands of lights, thousands of lives, thousands of couples, some falling in love, others falling apart. And somewhere in the city, my wife was waiting for a conversation that I wasn't sure either of us was ready to have. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. Tasha, I'm coming home. For the first time since the disaster at the restaurant, I felt absolutely nothing. No relief, no anger, no excitement, just exhaustion. Around 9 o'clock, headlights illuminated the driveway. I heard the front door open. The sound of her heels echoed through the hallway before she finally walked into the living room. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. She looked tired, not devastated, not heartbroken, just irritated, as if the previous 24 hours had been an inconvenience rather than the most humiliating moment of our marriage. She dropped her purse onto the couch and crossed her arms. We need to discuss what happened yesterday. I nodded toward the chair across from me. Go ahead. She sat down and let out a long sigh. I overreacted at the restaurant. I waited. That was it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I hurt you. Simply, I overreacted. You humiliated me in front of 60 people, Tasha. She immediately shook her head. You're exaggerating. I actually laughed. Exaggerating? You embarrassed me first. I stared at her, genuinely confused. How exactly did I embarrass you? She looked at me as if the answer were obvious. Joe, do you understand how ridiculous that ring looked? Ashley's husband bought her a $90,000 diamond last year. Michelle got a new Mercedes for her anniversary. Everybody expects more from someone in your position. Someone in my position. The words echoed in my mind. For years, I had convinced myself that Tasha loved me for who I was. But sitting there, listening to her compare our marriage to everyone else's, I realized something painful. She wasn't talking about love. She wasn't talking about respect. She wasn't even talking about us. She was talking about status, about appearances, about winning a competition that existed only in her mind. I leaned back in my chair. So that's what this is about? She frowned. What do you mean? You don't care about the ring itself. Of course I do. No. You care about what other people think about the ring. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The silence between us lasted several seconds. Finally, she stood up and started pacing around the room. You don't understand the pressure. What pressure? The pressure of being surrounded by people who have more than you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tasha, we're privileged. We have a beautiful house. We travel. We live comfortably. She stopped walking and looked directly at me. Comfortably isn't enough for me anymore. The sentence hit me harder than anything she had said in the restaurant. Not because it surprised me. Because, deep down, I had known for a long time that she felt that way. I just didn't want to admit it. She sat back down and lowered her voice. Look around us, Joe. Everyone we know is moving forward. And you think we're standing still? She hesitated. I think you could do more. I stared at her for several seconds. For 6 years, I had worked harder than anyone around me. Early mornings, late nights, business trips, missed holidays, countless sacrifices. And yet, sitting across from my wife, all of it somehow wasn't enough. What exactly do you want from me? I finally asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the room before quietly saying, I want the life we deserve. The life we deserve. At that moment, I realized that we were talking about two completely different things. To me, a good life meant peace, loyalty, trust, family. To her, a good life meant luxury, recognition, expensive jewelry, the admiration of strangers. For years, we had been walking side by side while chasing completely different dreams, and neither of us had noticed. Tasha stood up and grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen. When she returned, her tone had changed. Maybe we rushed into marriage. I felt my stomach tighten. What are you saying? She avoided my eyes. I'm saying that maybe we're no longer compatible. Compatible? It was amazing how people could reduce 6 years of memories to a single word. I thought about our first date, our wedding, the road trips, the nights we stayed awake, talking until sunrise. And now, somehow, all of it had become a question of compatibility. I slowly stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, snow had started falling. The city looked peaceful. Inside our house, everything was falling apart. Behind me, Tasha spoke again. I think we should take some time apart. I closed my eyes. For months, maybe even years, I had feared that this moment would come. And now that it was finally here, I wasn't shocked. I was simply sad. I turned around and looked at the woman I had loved for 6 years. Is that really what you want? She remained silent. And in that silence, I found my answer. For the first time since the restaurant, I stopped thinking about how to save my marriage. Instead, I started wondering whether there was anything left to save at all. Tasha picked up her purse once again. I'm going back to the hotel tonight. I nodded. Neither of us cried. Neither of us shouted. Sometimes, relationships don't end with dramatic arguments. Sometimes, they end in silence. She walked toward the front door, stopped for a brief moment, then looked back at me. I'll call you tomorrow. A few seconds later, the door closed behind her, and just like that, I found myself alone in a house that suddenly felt far too large, wondering whether the woman I had spent 6 years loving had ever truly loved me, or simply the life she believed I was supposed to give her. This story highlights an important truth about modern relationships. Genuine love cannot survive when it is built on material expectations alone. Through Joe and Tasha's marriage, the audience learns that wealth, luxury, and social status can easily distort people's priorities and transform affection into competition. The script demonstrates how constant comparisons with others, whether through friends, social media, or expensive lifestyles, can slowly destroy gratitude and emotional intimacy. Joe's experience teaches viewers that respect and loyalty are far more valuable than money. A healthy marriage is not measured by the price of a ring, the brand of a car, or the size of a bank account, but by mutual understanding, humility, and support during difficult times. Tasha's obsession with appearances shows the danger of allowing society's expectations to define personal happiness. The story also encourages self-reflection. It reminds people to appreciate the sacrifices made by their partners instead of constantly focusing on what others possess. Furthermore, it emphasizes the importance of communication, shared values, and emotional maturity in any long-term relationship. Ultimately, the script delivers a powerful lesson. Material possessions may attract attention, but only character, loyalty, and genuine love can build a lasting and meaningful life together.